Welcome to PCS with Military.com. I'm your host, Amy Bouchatz, Military.com's executive editor. On this podcast, we talk about everything you need to know to make this military move season your best yet. PCS with Military.com is brought to you by Navy Federal Credit Union, proudly serving all branches of the armed forces, veterans, and their families. No matter where you are in your military career, Navy Federal Credit Union has the products and resources to help you navigate your finances. Learn more at NavyFederal.org. Our members are the mission. Now, let's get this PCS started. Military spouses and family members know that military moves are just a part of life, and that they have to keep their personal lives and careers on a plug-and-play basis if they want to succeed. But some things are easier to move across the nation or world than others. For example, making new friends is one thing, but relocating your entire business is something entirely different. And yet, entrepreneurship is a really attractive option for military spouses and families because it relies on your own personal hustle instead of someone hiring you. How you develop something that can pack up and move with you is more art than science. To help us with tips and tricks for that art is Lakesha Cole, a Marine Corps spouse whose family recently retired to the Tampa, Florida area. Lakesha, a former Armed Forces Insurance Military Spouse of the Year, is one of my favorite people to talk to because she's full of amazing ideas and vision, has the success to back up what she says, and never does anything janky. She's even PCSed an entire brick and mortar business from one side of the world to the other. That's some crazy magic. Lakesha, welcome to PCS with Military.com.
Hi, Amy. Thank you for having me.
No jankiness here today because
No
we've got
jankiness.
you on the pod.
That needs to be a t-shirt.
And I believe that you could make that a t-shirt.
I
So,
think I could.
all right, tell us, how many times have you moved both with and without the military?
Oh, wow. I was born and raised in Portsmouth, Virginia, and I didn't move until I was about 14. We moved to the Camp Lejeune, North Carolina area. My mom was a federal government worker. And that was actually my first move ever. And then from there, we probably PCS 6 times, 5, 6 times.
Mm.
Yeah.
It's crazy because in this life we lose track of that stuff, you know?
Mhm.
How many other people lose track of how many times they move?
No one.
No one. But you guys were also stationed overseas. So at least one of those moves was to Japan, and then one of them was back from Japan, right?
Correct.
And did you do any PCSs Oconus to Oconus, which is like a whole different situation?
That was my first out of country experience. Yes.
All right.
Um,
Okay.
there's really nothing that can really prepare you for that for that experience. Not that I had a bad experience. I had an awesome experience. I know you hear a lot of the horror stories of PCSing overseas. And while I did have my challenges, especially when it comes to business, and I'm sure we'll talk about that a little later, my experience was great.
Cool. All right. So we are here to talk about moving a business. That's
Yeah.
what we're doing. So, how many of those times that we just talked about have you moved with the business in tow?
I've moved with my business in tow 3 times. So from, the Quantico, Virginia area, Camp Pendleton, and Okinawa, Japan. Well, I guess you could say
Okay.
to and from, so that would be 6, right?
So, yeah. So, a lot of times.
Yeah.
So, you know what you're doing now
Mhm.
with this. Okay. So, with that in mind, give us some background. What in your military life journey led you to start your own business? How did you get to the point where you were trying to move stuff like that?
I was frustrated. Like so many,
Mm.
spouses who probably listening to this recording, I found myself in a situation, of not being able to find, uh, the job that I desired. We had PCS from Virginia to California. I did everything that my parents told me to do. Go to college, get good grades, you'll get a great job, great salary, and all is well, right? And I did all of
Mhm.
that. PCS to California and just could not land a job in my field that was of decent pay. And that was frustrating to me because I had never been in a situation of where I wasn't able to sort of nail a job anywhere where we were, stationed.
And what was your field at that point? What were you
My
trying to
field
do?
communications, that was my
Okay.
field. Yes,
Okay.
so we were in this so I'm on the West Coast. It was actually my first time living in California, visiting California, being away from my friends and family. Had a great resume. I felt like I had great referrals, work experience at that point, and just couldn't land anything. And then when I finally got an interview, that was when it was actually my second interview, is when the whole question of being a military spouse started to play into the questions I was being asked during my interview. And that was sort of my first introduction of this whole conversation. Okay, what is this? What is happening? Why are they asking me this? Why do they care who I'm
Mm,
married
mhm,
to? And what difference is that really going to make? Right.
mhm,
Um, so that was my first introduction to that. So I couldn't find a job. I did end up finding some contract work that tied me over during the time that I was there. But prior to that, I had already decided I was going to start my business because I never wanted to be in a position of where I had to rely on someone else to pay me to do a job, right? So my
mhm.
husband was deployed. This was actually one of the roughest duty stations for us because he was gone a lot. 6 months home, 6 months gone. Kaylee was 2 at the time. Again, no friends and
And
family on the West Coast.
and she's how old now,
She's
just for context?
15. She's
Okay,
15, yeah.
so
So and no friends and family there, so it was really just me, solo parenting it as best as I could. While he was deployed, I decided I was gonna take $500 from our checking account. I drove myself to Los Angeles, the garment district. I taught myself how to be a buyer on the fly. I went and bought some merchandise wholesale, found someone on at the time, it was called Buku, which is like Craigslist, like Facebook Marketplace, like way back in the day where you can just find people who can do random things. And I found
yeah.
someone to build a website for like $200. He set up my whole e-commerce site and boom, that was my very first business. My first custom actually my first 3 orders were from my mom. Were from my mom. And then I started to, wear the garments to work and introduce these what I was selling to my coworkers, and they became customers, and their friends became customers, and it just kind of snowballed into this brand that, over the course of 8 years has traveled to all 50 states. We've served clients in about 7 different countries. And I was able to build something that not only contributed to the financial well-being of my household, but I was able to hire other military spouses and help them gain employment and help them grow their business as well.
Yeah. So we are focusing today on running a business and how to relocate with it. So you didn't stay in California.
I
You
did.
then get PCS somewhere else.
Yes.
Okay. So when you set up your business, did you design it to be something that could move? Was that part of your initial planning?
That was never part of my initial plan, and actually, longevity was never part of the initial planning. It was, "I need a job. I couldn't find work. I know how to make money. Let me go and figure out how to do that." And that was my
Right.
initial plan. I didn't have a business plan. I didn't have any business experience, don't have a business degree. Never I worked in retail for what, maybe 2 weeks at a shoe store, and then I realized I really dislike feet, and that was not the job for me. So, that was the extent of my retail experience. So, here I am walking into this world because I believe that much in myself and my ability to learn whatever I needed to learn to be successful at it, and I just ran with it. So no, it was
Yeah.
never part of my strategy to build something that was portable that I could take to every duty station.
So, okay, like I'm envisioning myself in your shoes, but no without feet talk because now we know
Right.
you don't like feet. Um, I'm envisioning myself in your shoes. Okay, we get orders. I have a business, and now I have to move it.
Mhm.
What was that moment like that you realized? Okay, that's what's next, and we do what?
Right. So I actually started doing a little bit of research and I couldn't find anything that was related to our community and being an entrepreneur and business owner and how to relocate your business. All of the research that I found was actually like these large corporations that were like opening multiple locations and maybe closing one and
Hmm.
relocating to another area, but that information didn't apply to my business. I knew I was on to something because, it's one thing when you create a product and you're not sure who's going to buy it, but then it's another thing when you create a product and not only do people buy it, but they start to refer other people, then they become repeat customers. That's a whole nother
Mhm.
high, for, like, product-based business owners. So I knew I was onto something when people kept coming back and asking for more, and I knew I didn't wanna close it, that I wanted to continue to explore the idea to figure out how far I could take this thing. So when I started to plan to move, it was once we received orders of where we were going, then I could actually sit down and kind of come up with a game plan. Okay, we're going to be near Washington D.C. This is like the mecca of, fashion and successful people and professional people, and all industries are here. So there's so many different opportunities for me to tap into here. That was the first thing that came to mind. Get to know where you're moving to and figure out what opportunities are available there for you to potentially tap into. And I
Hmm.
didn't think past that. It was really just me familiarizing myself with the new area at that time.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So you end up moving it.
Mhm.
And I want to talk about how to be successful in this first, or I want to talk about how to be successful in it. But first, rather, I'd like to talk about the biggest maybe a mistake or two you made while exploring this, because you really were in uncharted waters as
Mhm.
far as you knew. And when we go out on our own and we try stuff, sometimes that involves some stumbles and some mistakes. So what is maybe the biggest mistake you made when trying to do that move?
I would probably say not doing enough homework and not
Mm,
um preparing myself on the financial side of it. You know, most spouses in our space don't like to talk about the money. They don't want to have the money conversation, but it has to happen when you're talking about growing your business because yes, we are entrepreneurs and we're natural problem solvers and that's why so many of us start businesses, right? But if your
mhm,
business isn't
mhm.
profitable, is it really a business? Like we're all in the business of making money and making a living. And I just felt like I needed to say that because there's so much harshness around, spouses wanting to have a profitable business, and it's okay to want to have a profitable business. So some of the mistakes that I
Right.
made early on was not looking close enough at the numbers. Does this
Yeah.
business financially make sense? Am I going to turn a profit? Is it going to be successful? And I didn't
Yeah.
examine that information early on. Had I done that early on, I would have scaled to 6 figures much quicker than I did.
Hmm. It's interesting that you say that because when you started to say, had I done that early on, I'm like, my brain goes to, and I would have not wasted money or whatever, right? But what you're
Mhm.
saying is, had I done that early on, I would have been way more successful.
Yes, I would have been way more successful had I looked at the financials early on. The financials meaning how much money do I really need to pour into this business to one, um, grow it into a recognizable household brand, right? You got to have your branding intact. You got to have your marketing in place. You want to make sure you're not paying too much for products. You want to make sure your profit margins are good. Like all of that, it was just me going, buying some garments, and then me reselling it. And even the upcharge that I was charging on the merchandise wasn't even enough to really sustain or grow the business. It was just what I thought I needed
Mm,
to do, right? So learning more
hmm.
about your industry, learning more about your products, having a sales process in place, having marketing in place. Like there is enough information. And this was way before Facebook, way before you could go to YouTube University and figure out how to learn anything, right? So this was
Yeah.
really back in the day of you really when they say you started your business from scratch, you really did start from scratch. You don't have that now, right? You can go online and
Hmm.
find any information that you need and you don't have to have some of the same growing pains that a lot of us did 10, 15 years ago. Learn your industry, learn what's working, learn what other people are doing, and take cues from them. Don't be out here um, unprepared for what that next step is going to be for you or
Right.
should be for you.
So okay, so I want you to pair this with the moving. aspect, because I
Mhm.
suspect that when you look at the financials, right, you're in place A, you're going to place B. How does that move impact that? I mean, there's obviously there's getting to and from. I don't mean that.
Right.
I mean in a bigger picture way.
So it it can have a significant impact. Your customer base at Camp Pendleton is not going to be the same at Camp Lejeune, right? You don't make
Mhm.
the same amount of money. Two, the job opportunities are not the same in those two locations. And three, your customer base, if you're targeting a local customer base, you want to know what that household medium income is and what type of disposable income that they have to still be able to support your business. So yeah, you definitely want to determine the costs when you're relocating, and the cost includes more than just expenses, the expected expenses of physically moving your household goods and equipment. You want to find out what the tax advantages or disadvantages you would have in your new
Mhm.
state or country. In most cases, your sales tax rate will change, which could lead to an increase in prices for your customers. You want to know all these things before you start selling and before you start taking in new customers. Shipping costs will change as well. Again, I was an
Mm.
hour away from the LA garment district, so I could just drive up the road and restock. Well, now that I moved from California to Virginia or to North Carolina, now I have to factor in how much it's going to cost to get my goods
Right.
shipped, right? Which also will affect the price. And operating overseas may also
Oh.
require you to pay duty taxes on importing goods. So you want to make sure you learn
Mhm.
the process and follow whatever the regulations are in your state or country accordingly.
And for a digital business, right? So, because so many of us are now the digital entrepreneurs, right?
Mhm,
We've got writing, or we don't have a physical product because we
mhm.
use drop shipping or whatever, right? How did you, and I know you have a lot of experience in this too. So tell us, what are like, what's the financial considerations of the digital based business?
Well, there's
Same thing?
I would say yes, it's the same thing, but you don't have the burden of a lot of the overhead that those of us with product-based businesses would have, right? You don't have to worry about the overhead of inventory. If you move into a physical
Right.
location, you don't have to worry about that unless you choose to have an office outside of your home. So I would say
Mhm.
yes, it's the same thing. Um, I would just say just be mindful of what those regulations are in the area that you're relocating to, particularly around taxes.
Mhm. Yeah, man. Things I don't like thinking about.
Yeah.
Taxes. I mean, I think everyone can agree with that. So,
Yep.
not the controversial statement. Just a quick pit stop here to thank our sponsor. PCS with Military.com is brought to you by Navy Federal Credit Union. They might be called Navy Federal, but they don't exclusively serve sailors. Serving all members of the armed forces, they have the products and resources to help you navigate your finances through every phase of life. So, even if you can't tell port from starboard, they'll still help you learn about mortgages and auto loans. Learn more at NavyFederal.org. Navy Federal Credit Union, our members are the mission, an equal housing lender. And now, back to the show. Can you give us some steps that people can take to move their business? And you also have like a very unique experience of moving a brick and mortar business from overseas to stateside, which I still sit here like when I say that about you, I'm like, how did you do that? Even though you have told me a bunch of times how
Yeah.
you did that, uh, very carefully and by looking at the financials. But maybe talk about some of these practical steps, while keeping in mind that we're talking about both brick and mortar and a
Mhm.
digital experience.
Yeah. So first, you want to know your base. The rules and regulations differ from base to base. In our case, relocating overseas to Okinawa changed how we operated, particularly with distribution, right? So if you
Mm,
choose to live on base, it's important to follow your local housing authorities' policies and guidance, as well as any state and local requirements. Just because we're military spouses does not mean we are exempt or have any type of privilege over any of those rules and regulations. So that should be your first step is knowing what your responsibility is as a business owner in that location. And if you're unsure, you can contact your housing office for assistance um, to ensure that you're in compliance with regulations and specific requirements for your installation. And if you're overseas, you want to check that status of forces agreement that specifically talks about how you can and cannot conduct commercial activity. I was
Mm.
able to find a loophole. A working solution is what I like to call it. I pushed it to the limit, but we were operating within regulations, right? And we were able to
Mm.
get it done. So figure out what that line is for you and pursue it. Um,
Mm.
and then, of course, I would say you want to determine the costs. We talked about, making sure that you have a separate budget from the expenses you're going to require to move and then the expenses that you're going to need to relocate your business. Those should not be one of the same. You should have two separate budgets for the two. Again,
Mm.
finding out what your tax advantages and disadvantages are in the different areas and stay on top of those tax requirements for yourself and for your business. Currency is a
Why two separate I'm sorry to interrupt,
Go
but why two separate considerations for moving the physical act of moving your business and then the, ramifications of doing so?
Right. Well, you shouldn't be commingling your business funds with your personal funds anyway,
Hmm.
right?
Mhm.
So we want
Mhm.
to keep that in mind. Also, when you're PCSing, and I don't know if this has changed, but when we were PCSing, TMO is not allowed to pack and move your business assets.
Hmm.
So some of the things that you own, you may have to ship on your own. That's
Mhm.
an expense that you may not be aware of that you have to take on. But you want to make sure that you know what that policy is before TMO pulls up to your house and get ready, for pack out. And then there are things that they just can't take, right? And you don't want to be caught off guard. So I always say set up the budget for your household and then set up the budget for your business. Two separate entities, treat them as such.
Mm. 'Kay. So,
Yeah.
tax considerations.
Yes.
Apologies.
Yes. Currency is another factor to consider, especially when you're relocating overseas. That currency
Hmm.
value fluctuates daily. I knew nothing about the yen rate and the exchange and all of that. Became an expert at it by the time we left 4 years later. But anything can swing it. Political and economic events or even unexpected natural disasters can change that currency rate. And now your prices are all out of whack, and you have to figure out how to make the numbers make sense. Um,
Mhm.
we buy supplies in our local economy when we were there, and the currency rate determines how little or how much we could purchase. So you want to make sure
Right.
that you're always in tune with what that rate is and even picking up the trends on when it fluctuates um, and when it doesn't, so that you can prepare properly on your end. We also
Mhm.
participate in events where we are required to conduct transactions in yen when we were in Okinawa. So knowing when you have to accept that currency ahead of time allows you to for better strategic planning on your end in terms of your bottom line. So you just want to
Mm.
consider these factors when you're determining price points to protect your bottom line against any fluctuations. Then you want to
Mhm.
start networking. I always like to say your business should arrive before you do. So
Mm.
whether you sell a product or service, networking with other business owners is really the key to your success. Again, when I started this, we didn't have Facebook or any of this social media stuff. Now you can find a group or start a community in any location. So, and I'm pretty sure at every single base there's a Facebook group or something that's specifically for military spouse entrepreneurs. You want to join those groups. You want to start asking questions. You want to start introducing yourself to know other people in the group. And then once you feel comfortable with where you are, then you start to introduce your business to that group. So you want to connect with other spouses on these different social media platforms. Reach out to a diverse group of professionals with various skills and experience to help you gain insight on the customer demographic, the demands of the community, as well as your competitors. So that could be your local chamber of commerce. That could be your local military, hiring our heroes, military spouse network group. There's so many different little organizational groups in these areas and on these installations that can help you figure out what this information should be for your business. So again, you can make your business plan make sense for you at that new duty station.
I love networking, as you
Mhm.
know. So, but I think that people often discredit the idea of a network within a network.
Mhm.
That you can build a network of people who you can go to and then leverage their networks for you.
Yeah.
And like we didn't talk about this in the intro. I just want to give you a second though to talk about Make Her because that is such a good example of this very thing. And as you know, I am a big fan of
Yes.
what you guys do with that. So talk to us about Make Her. What is it?
We have our Make Her Meal Spouse retreat that is coming up on April 29th. And
So it will have passed by the time people hear this podcast,
yes,
but
but
2022 exists.
yes,
So,
it does. But it's a 3-day, 2-night work and virtual wellness experience created for today's modern military spouse entrepreneur. So the retreat is an extension of the influential military spouse, our friend, lifetime blogger, Army Wife 101, and the Mill Spouse Influencer Network housed at Sofluential Media, where digital influence and entrepreneurships are popular focal points. One of the things that people will love about Make Her is that it's very diverse, it's very inclusive, it's a very intimate learning, impactful business experience for those who are ready to level up in their business. If you're just starting out, this could be a great place for you as well. But if you're also looking to scale, this is also a home for you. So we bring in top-notch CEOs to come and teach you. This session, we're teaching you about money. We're teaching you about sales and marketing and social media, and just really giving you some actionable education, money making tools for you to grow in your business. And for those of you who are, still active duty and, you're still in the place where you're having to relocate your businesses, Mako gives you the tools that you need to be successful at that. So you should definitely look out for our retreat next year, and you can go to our website at millspouseretreat.com, and you'll be able to find any other opportunities for you to maybe go back and kind of listen at this retreat, since this is going to air afterwards, and stay on the
mhm.
lookout. Get on the email list to get details for the next event that we have. But it is
Yeah,
truly a one of a kind experience. You just kind of have to experience it for yourself. You were at our inaugural event, Amy.
I was. And
And yes,
I'm emceeing the 2021 event. So everybody can just trust me that I think this is great because because I wouldn't do that if I didn't love what you guys are doing. But yeah, when I said earlier that you don't do anything janky, that's how I know for sure because because there was no jankiness there. But
none.
it really does, like what we were talking about here, like it did provide me even somebody who has been in this space for a really long time. And I know so many people. I met people I had never even, like encountered at all before
Right.
at this, which is not my normal experience. It's just,
Yeah.
I've just been in this space for so long. That doesn't happen very often.
And that was intentional too on our part, because we wanted to make sure we were finding some really dope military spouse in this space. I don't want to say that no one's checking for, but that flies under the radar enough to where, their names aren't splashed everywhere, but they
Right.
are mega successful in their businesses, in their industries, and just really kicking butt out there.
Exactly, and now these people are in my network,
Mhm.
and so when I need something, I can go to them and leverage their networks, and
Yes.
because we spent a couple of super I mean, you and I are both introverts, so we
Mhm.
would never we would never do a retreat that was gonna exhaust us, but, like, because we spent some time building relationships with those people,
Mhm.
now I trust them and I know that I can go to them,
Right.
and that's the kind of thing that you have to have if you are going to successfully PCS with your business
Mhm.
because I know a lot of people but I don't know everybody as
Right.
evidenced, right? And if I'm going to move from Alaska to let's say Georgia or somewhere really sort of far afield from my normal network, I'm not probably going to know anyone who's
Right.
actually there. But I might know somebody who
I
knows
know
somebody
somebody.
who's there,
Mhm.
and that's huge.
Yes.
It's so huge.
I always say build your network before you need it, because you're going to
Mm,
need it. And whether
mhm.
you're on the East Coast, West Coast, or overseas, you need to get out of I do say network in these Facebook groups, but I also want you to come out of these Facebook groups, and when we can and when it's safe again, to start
Mhm.
networking with people in person as well. You'll be surprised how those paths will cross again at some point. And
Yeah.
you don't know who they know, right? And they don't know
No,
who you
exactly.
know. And you guys can not only become great friends, but you can become great assets for each other as well. So build your network
Exactly.
before you need it. And that's not to say you meet someone and then you go for the ask, right? I don't
Right.
like that. That's annoying. And that's the quickest way to get a no from me. I
That's a
knew
little janky,
a
but you
little
don't do janky.
yes, a little janky, a little suspect. But when you meet people, just show some interest in people and get to know people, get to know their families, their kids, get to know about their business. And once you both feel like you've reached a level of comfort within your friendship or business ship or whatever ship you're on, um, then you can start to build in those asks to where it feels authentic and where it feels genuine, not opportunist.
Yeah. Yeah. And so what I love about what we're talking about here is that when people hear, what do you need to know about moving your business?
Mhm.
They are probably thinking they're going to walk into this conversation and we're going to talk about, how to file your transfer your
Right,
LLC to a new space or whatever. But this is like that's the technical stuff and that's
right,
important. And
right.
that depends on where you're going. But
Mhm,
this is like the universal meat of the matter. This is
mhm.
the stuff that people don't automatically think of
Right.
that does set you up for success. And I really appreciate these insights because I don't think that if you hadn't done this so many times, you would know this stuff. This is the stuff people don't think about.
This is the stuff that you learn the hard way, and then you make it your mission for no one else to have to learn it the hard
Yeah.
way. There is no reason why anyone, and I just say this jokingly, but if you're stationed in Okinawa, going to Okinawa, you can have a successful business. I don't care what that business is. It can
Mm,
be successful in Okinawa. Um, you just have to find the right language and the regulation to be able to do that. But there are just so many factors that play into relocating and successfully relocating because again your bottom line is always should always be top of mind. How is this going to affect my bottom line? But one of the things that we have not talked about, Amy, is that
mm.
when we PCS, when to know to let the business go.
Yeah, and I'm glad you bring that up because I was just about to ask you,
Yes,
right? Like
yes,
sometimes you find yourself facing a pivot.
yes,
What do you do? How do you know? And I know you're like I just am always been so impressed with how you personally handled this subject. So I'm sitting here, I'm waiting for your advice. Give it to us.
yes. So when to know when to let it go. For me, it was the business was no longer one profitable, and
Mm,
two, it did not bring me joy. And sometimes our ideas are outdated, right? Our it's just
mm,
like you can outgrow a business idea, you can outgrow a business. And I got to a point in my life to where I felt like I had outgrew my business. It was no longer profitable in the way that I wanted it to be. And then I had to do what financially made the most sense, which was to close the business. But when you're relocating to one location to the next, and that the local landscape matters. People think because I'm digital and I serve people everywhere, the local landscape still matters. You know the saying, all politics is local? I
mhm.
believe all business is local. So you want to make sure you know what that local landscape is. And the reason why I say this is because when I relocated back from Okinawa to North Carolina and I decided to open my first US brick and mortar store, I did my research, but what surprised me was how what's the right language I want to use? The town was not rooted in small business success as I thought it would be. And
Mm,
if you just drive an hour and a half up the road to Fayetteville, their small business culture was a lot different. So not having a robust culture for small business to thrive will eventually impact your bottom line. And that's what I experienced there, and that's what so many other business owners experience in that location. So you want to make sure that you're in a place that supports your growth as a small business owner. Um, and that really factored into when to close and when to pivot and do something else.
yeah. Yeah, but okay, so we've talked a lot about the financials here, but
Mhm.
you said something really important a few minutes ago, which was about how it didn't give you joy anymore.
Yeah.
And I so much of what we do as military spouses and with our businesses are passion driven, and it's about giving yourself purpose. Yes, it's about helping your family financially. Yes,
Mhm.
it's about all sorts of other things. But one
Mhm.
of them is that it makes you happy. It has to be.
Right.
So can you just touch on that just a little bit and how that played in and how you advise other people to factor that in for themselves?
Yes, when I started my business, my daughter was 2. I had 1 kid. I now have 3 kids, 15, 6, and 5. And the lifestyle that I had with that business and with 1 kid, it just no longer fits my world. I don't wanna be sitting in a store, running a store 40, 50
Mm,
hours a week, overseeing, a dozen employees, having to worry about inventory, having to figure it out through a pandemic, having to it was just it you wanna see somebody who was just completely unhappy. I was literally under my desk saying, "I
mm,
do not want to do this anymore. This is just not where I want to be. This is not what I want to do." And, it was kind of the perfect storm for me in a sense to where I was able to pivot from one and into a very successful business that are not actually aligned with each other at all, but it was all because I made the decision to choose me and my happiness and my family first,
mm,
and not worry about what was going to happen next because I knew that the lessons that I've learned over the past 8 years with this retail business, there is not another business that I can start that won't be successful. In my mind, they all would be successful because I have the battle scars to prove it. I have the experience, I have the knowledge, I have the network, I have the resources. And I needed to experience that for me to be able to grow and flourish and do other things. That's the thing, we're all great at multiple things. And sometimes we get so married to our ideas that we don't even recognize when they're no longer working. And I had
right,
to get
right.
myself to a point where if it's no longer working, why are you holding on to it? Why are you keeping it? There are so many other things that you're great at. You can be doing. Go do those things. And that's
Mm,
what I decided to do. So, you want to make so how did I make that decision? One, it wasn't profitable, and two, it just did not bring me joy anymore. And there were just so many
mm,
other things that I wanted to do, and I couldn't do it because I was tied down to this one business that I felt like I had to keep going because so many other people believed in it. They were still shopping, they were still supporting it, and it just wasn't there for me anymore. It wasn't.
yeah. And you had to make the decision to do something that was best for you. And we talk in this space a lot about self-care. It's almost like this terribly overused phrase, right?
Mhm.
Resiliency and all of these things. But at the end of the day, what we mean by that is looking in the mirror and taking care of yourself
Yes.
and doing the things that are best for you. And that does not, I think it should include a spa day sometimes, but
Right.
it does not necessarily include a spa day. It includes asking yourself, making tough questions and making tough decisions that might hurt a little bit in that moment, like letting
Right.
go of something that you are really dedicated to and you're worried about letting other people down or whatever.
Mhm.
And instead of worrying about that, just worrying about yourself for a hot second. And
Yeah.
that's okay.
It is okay. It's a lot of saying no, which makes a
Mm,
lot of people uncomfortable, and it's saying no to sometimes people you care about, and you have a great deal of respect for, but saying no is for you, it's for your sanity, it's for your well-being, it's for your self-care, and all you can do is hope that the other person understands that. And I
right.
experienced that several times over the past year of just saying no and not feeling bad about it, not having to apologize for it, and really just hoping that the person on the other end can extend some grace and understand why I have to finally say no at this point because it's what's best for me, is what's best for my family, is what's best for my business.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, Lakeisha, I am so so just love that you shared your expertise with us today. I'm so appreciative of that and of your time and of your experience and that you're gifting that to us. Thank you so much. Thank you for being on PCS with Military.com.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much for listening to PCS with Military.com. Want more PCS advice? Check out the rest of our episodes wherever you get your podcasts. A special thanks to our sponsor, Navy Federal Credit Union, proudly serving all branches of the armed forces, veterans, and their families. No matter where you are in your military career, Navy Federal Credit Union has the products and resources to help you navigate your finances. Learn more at NavyFederal.org. Our members are the mission.